Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Kiddushin, pages 7 through 13, Zayin through Yud Gimel. 7. How Gavra the Iktash B'Shiroi. A man betrothed a woman by giving her some silks. Rabbi Amar L'Tzricha Shumi. Rabbi says you don't have to evaluate or estimate how much those silks are worth. Whereas Rav Yosef says Tzricha Shumi, you have to do an estimate of how much this is worth. Rav Yosef Amar Tzricha Shumi. So why is it necessary to check how much this is worth? After all, it definitely has the minimal shavapruta. It's worth well more than that. So the marriage should be effective regardless of what it's actually worth. But the Gemara says the reason why one school of thought requires a professional estimation of the value is because the woman knows that she doesn't know what it's worth. And she's concerned that she might be under the impression it's very valuable, but in fact it's really worth very little. It could be a scam. So because she's uncertain of how much she's getting, she may not put her full heart into acceptance of the shiraim, of this item, and therefore is in her own mind wavering as to whether she's even married. So as to avoid any and all ambiguity, the item has to be evaluated. Daf page 8. His kajdi bekikar. The man says, I want to be you be betrothed to me with this loaf of bread. And her response is, Tanei alani, give it to the poor guy. Eina mekudeshet. She's not married. Even if the poor man she referenced is someone who generally is supported by her. My time. So why is she not married? After all, by saying give it to the poor guy, it sounds like she's taking possession of the loaf and then redirecting it to somewhere else, but that she accepted it and accepted the Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, Amrale, well, no, she never accepted the loaf of bread and thus did not accept the Kiddushin. Rather, she was effectively saying to the guy, just as I have a responsibility to be charitable, give tzedakah to so-and-so the poor man, so do you, so go ahead and do it. And I'm not involved, and therefore we're not married. That's the idea. Daf Tet, page 9. Boy Reb Shimon ben Lakish. What happens if a document of betrothal, a shtar erison, was not written for the sake of this woman? It has the right names on it, but when it was originally written by the sofer, he didn't have in mind these particular people. So does that work or not? So do we say that we compare divorce to marriage, just as when you're getting out of the union by way of divorce, the document must be lishma for her sake. So too, when you enter into this union, matrimony, it must be for her own sake. Alternatively, maybe no. Maybe we don't compare divorce to betrothal. We compare the betrothal to betrothal. And when it comes to kesef, to money, the money wasn't minted for the sake of this girl. The money was minted in some factory in Philadelphia or Denver or San Francisco. It wasn't minted for this kiddushin, for this woman. And yet it works. So too also, when it comes to the document, it need not be lishma for her sake. Having asked this question and seen the two sides of the question, the Gemara then gives an answer. We compare the marriage to divorce, and therefore, just as the shtar of the get must be for her sake, so too the shtar of the kiddushin must be for her sake. Daf Yud. The sages said, if the daughter of an Yisrael, of an Israelite, marries a Kohen, so once they're fully married, she's allowed to eat truma as part of a Kohanic household. But the question is whether or not she's allowed to eat truma when they're not fully married with nisuin, they're only married at the level of erison. And so there is a machloket in the Gemara between various Tanoim as to whether or not under the Torah law, the Oraita, she's allowed to eat the truma. But the sages said, black letter law, at least rabbinically, that we're not going to allow this daughter of Israel who marries a Kohen to eat the truma until she enters into the chuppah, meaning until the nisuin is completed. Yud Aleph. Beit Shammai Omrim, Bedinar of a dinar. In order to have kiddushin with money or item worth money, it has to be not a pruta, but a dinar, which is substantially more than a pruta. So whereas the halacha requires a very minimal amount, the Shammaites required a fairly substantial amount. My time in Beit Shammai. So why does they hold of this elevated financial standard? Amar Rabbi Zera, Shekenisha Makperes Alatzma, it was Kadeshes B'Faras Medinar, because a woman is careful upon herself that she wouldn't want to be accept betrothal for less than a dinar. Remember that the Hillelites represented the plebeians, and the Shammaites represented the patricians, the wealthier class. And if you're from the wealthier class, are you going to want to marry yourself off for a very low sum? It'd be beneath your dignity. So it's not surprising then that there's a higher dollar level for the Shammaites than for the Hillelites. Yudbet. Rav menagid al mekadesh beshuka, vel mekadesh bevia, vel mekadesh below shiduchin, vel metzar shtucha derabanan. Rav in his court would give corporal punishment to people who violated certain basic standards of decency, as he defined them. One is if they betrothed the girl in the marketplace, out in the public sphere, not at a wedding, but just out in the store, in the restaurant, like in the show Shtisel. So if you do that, you violated a norm. We'll smack you. Or you betroth a girl by way of marital relations. It's indecent. Or without shiduchim, without some kind of a prior arrangement. Just to do it off the cuff, not right. And lastly, he would smack someone if they were bothering, if they were pestering the representatives of the court, the shliach beis din. If you annoy the shliach beis din, you've done wrong, we're going to hurt you. Yud Gimel. A woman attains her freedom to remarry whoever she wants upon the death of her husband. Menalan, how do we know this? It doesn't actually say so explicitly in the Torah. Svarahu, well, it's a logical statement. Hu asra, he forbids her by way of marrying her. Hu sharta, he releases her by way of dying. So the Gemara then says, maybe that's not a good proof. There are arguments against it. Ela amar kra, rather there's a verse that says, Ken yamut ba milchama, v'yishacher yikachena. When it comes to certain soldiers or young men who are exempted from military service, one of the categories is a man who just betrothed a woman and didn't fully marry her yet. And what's the reason for letting him go free? Lest he die in battle in the war and someone else will marry her. The fact that the Torah says someone else is going to marry her, it means what? How was she released from her legal bond of matrimony? By way of the death of the husband. And that's the proof. Everyone have a great week.